Hello and welcome. My name is Petey and this is an exercise demonstration video for Move Strength Training Level 1. In this video, we are going to go over the hip hinge, the deadlift, the rear-legged deadlift or the RDL, and the kettlebell swing. Now, I put all these exercises together in this video because they all build off the initial hip hinge movement. So we're going to start with that one. For your hip hinge, you want your heels under your hips or just outside of your hips. For the hip hinge, it's a body weight exercise. We want to sit the weight in the midfoot or the heel. You want to keep the chest nice and proud, and you can use your hands at first to get you used to this movement. It's almost like you're chopping at the waist here to hinge the hip and press the hips back behind you, almost like there's something behind you that you're trying to reach with your hips. You should feel a lengthening in your hamstrings and your glutes, and you're going to turn on your hamstrings and your glutes to press you back to a standing position. So back is nice and flat the whole time. I don't want to see any of this. Nice flat back, find space through the collarbones, brace that core, press the hips back behind you, and come back to the top. My knees are soft, but they're not my main movers here. My hips are going to be my main movers. That progresses into the deadlift. Now, the deadlift is a hip hinge initiated exercise. So with the deadlift, you are going to be using some weight, whether that's a kettlebell or a dumbbell. Either way, the movement pattern is going to be the same. So setting up just like we did the hip hinge with heels outside the hips, back is nice and flat, your core is braced. You're going to take that same hip hinge movement to go down for your deadlift. Now, if the weight is a little bit lower, you then may have to bend your knees a little bit. We want to make sure we're keeping the back nice and flat. And again, the hip hinge initiates the movement, not the knees. So keeping that core tight, hinging at the hips, bending the knees just a little bit if you have to, and using glutes and hamstrings to power back to the top. So again, hip hinge, you don't have to touch the ground with this every time. Go until you feel the lengthening in the hamstrings, and then use those hamstrings and glutes to power back to the top. Really, really important when you're holding weight to keep your back absolutely flat. So please try to avoid any of this movement, any rounding movement as you go down. If you feel your back start to round, stop the movement, come out of it, reset, and then jump back in. Now, for the RDLs, that's variation on our deadlift. It is a single leg deadlift. Please start these off unweighted so you can get used to this movement. This is also a balance challenge. So in this movement here, you're going to be planting one foot on the ground. Now we're going to use the same hip hinge movement, but this time we're doing it single leg. So as you hinge that hip and keep the back nice and flat, you're going to take the other foot up towards the ceiling. So I'm taking my heel up towards the ceiling. The goal here is to keep hips and shoulders nice and square to the ground. And then I'm using the glute and the hamstring of my standing leg to come back up to the top. So again, on the other leg here, planting my foot into the ground. It's okay to be a little bit wobbly at first as your body gets used to this exercise. Taking my heel up towards the sky. Again, we want to watch out for any rounding in the back. So I don't want to see any of this. We want to keep that back nice and flat. Shoulder blades, balance. Shoulder blades are engaged. So I'm squeezing my shoulder blades together in the back to make sure I'm nice and supported. Bracing my core to keep my hips and shoulders square to the ground, and lower back nice and protected. All right, when you weight the RDL, you are going to weight it to help with your balance. So whatever foot is going to be the standing foot, you want to put the weight in the opposite hand. This keeps you from opening up during the exercise. So weight is in the opposite hand. It does not have to go all the way to the ground. You're taking it until you feel the stretch in the hamstring. For me, that's about knee level, and then I'm coming back up towards the top. Start with a nice light weight for this. Keep the weight in the standing heel. Back is nice and flat. Glutes and hamstrings power that exercise. The last exercise of this video that we're going to go over is the kettlebell swing. So the kettlebell swing is the explosive, ballistic version of our hip hinge and our deadlift. So when we set up for this exercise, we want to set up with a kettlebell about a foot or two in front of us. You want to step back just a little bit so that you can initiate with a back swing. So again, I'm setting up for my hip hinge, just like we did earlier with the body weight hip hinge. Heels right outside the hips, core is tight. I'm going to hinge my hips, keep my back nice and flat, and reach towards that kettlebell. This is my starting position. I'm loaded into the hamstrings and the glutes. My back is super, super flat. I have the kettlebell tilted towards me. You're going to start with a back swing and then drive forward. Now I'm reaching through my legs for that back swing, and I'm driving forward with glutes and hamstrings for the swing up to the top. This is not a shoulder raise. So the arms are not doing a whole lot of work at the top here. The kettlebell is sort of floating. I'm keeping my back nice and flat. My head is nice and proud and in line with the rest of my spine. I'm using my glutes and hamstrings to power through this exercise. And last but not least, I want to breathe in on the way back and out on the way up. All right. And you're going to set it down the exact same way you picked it up. Awesome. So this was our hip hinge, our deadlift, our RDL, and our kettlebell swing.